my name is Dee and this is my channel called The Needlewoman, which I'm not sure if it's going to be a regular channel. I actually just posted one video which wasn't even meant for YouTube. It wasn't filmed in the right format or the high quality or anything like that. It was a video when I purchased my Brother KE100 motor, and I just wanted to show a couple of friends what it was all about, but I did end up uploading it to YouTube in case people found it helpful, and I think maybe a few people did, because I actually got a question, and this video is going to be basically a follow-up to that question, and hopefully I'm going to throw in a couple of more things to basically show you what happens when things go wrong when using the Brother KE100 motor, or rather the safety features that are built into it so that your knitting machine doesn't get damaged. So the question I got asked was if I use a knot sensor and a yarn break sensor, and the answer is yes, I do. And the person wanted to know how they were installed. Now, these sensors, they're actually one whole unit. So I'll show you what that looks like. If I remove it, this is basically it. And that can just pop back onto the rod, which is your yarn mast setup. So what happens is, I'll show you in the book, okay? It shows you that you are supposed to remove the yarn tension unit head of your knitter from the rod, pull out the take-up springs, and then replace the tension unit that came with your knitting machine with the tension unit head of the KE100. And then you pop the take-up springs in there, and then you place the whole thing onto the rod. So what happened with me is when I actually bought this, I bought it as a whole package, like it was already set up like this. So all I did was I actually took out the rod, the whole yarn mast setup from my knitting machine, where it pops in there, and then just replaced it with this whole unit. Just pop that into place. And then this little sort of arm lever, it goes through there and it just keeps it from sort of like rattling around too much. And that was the easiest setup I had to do. But I'll show you a close-up of what the knot sensor actually is. So it is this little flap here that goes, it can go up and down. So you can pull it up, so when you're threading your machine, it makes it a little bit easier because you've got to come from down here, and then you can thread it through there. You've got a sort of bigger area where you can thread it through, and then that can pop down, and your yarn slots into one of those two little areas there. And one's wider, one's narrower, so it depends what yarn you're using, depends which slot you're going to use. And that should be able to sense a knot if there's a knot coming out from the yarn. And then it goes through the tension discs as normal, and then it comes down here. Now this here is the actual yarn break sensor, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to unthread it and get this out of the way. Move it on the other side maybe. There's another one on the other side. So if you are knitting using two yarns, two colors, you can still have this whole setup. So this lever here, as you can see, sort of flops down when the yarn runs out or yarn breaks, and that sends some kind of a signal saying, you know, there's an issue. Let me try and thread this back up that way. So when it's threaded correctly and there's a correct tension, this should look like that. It should sort of be up. And then you go down here, thread it as normal through that, and then the yarn take up spring, and then thread it down to the actual machine, to the actual carriage. Now I'm just going to go quickly back up here and show you there is a cable that comes out of this tension unit head. And it comes down and it clips onto the yarn mast here, sort of with this little plastic thing just to keep it out of the way. It comes down here, and follow the cable. There's a little clip at the back of the machine just for cable management, and then it goes down here and just sort of hangs, and then it's here, and it plugs into here. This one here is the foot control pedal, and I'll show you that one a little bit later on. And this one here is another sensor that if we follow that back up, again, sort of clips on there, and then kind of comes, whoops, comes around here. It's a bit hard to see, but this is where that goes into, and this is the motor overload sensor. So that also is supposed to stop the motor. So these safety features, basically what they're going to do is, if there is a break in the yarn, if there is a knot in the yarn, or if your carriage jams for some reason, it will basically disconnect and it will stop the motor so that your machine doesn't get damaged. So I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, so here we are at the front of the machine again, and I'm going to show you how it actually connects to your knitting machine. So this part here, it's called the coupler, and that has to connect to your carriage. Now, the motor comes with this part as a standard, this metal plate, which you have to install where your handle is. So what you have to do is you have to remove the handle, install this metal plate, put the handle back as well, and then using the original screws of the handle, just put it all back together again. You can see now that the handle doesn't sit quite flush the way it used to. There's quite a gap, and sort of doesn't sit in the same place where it was, but it doesn't really cause any issues. The only thing you can't do now is you can't fold the handle back down, but that's only something you're going to do normally if you're packing your machine up. So it just stays like this, and again, no issues, just using it back and forth to if you have to knit manually. And then let me move up here, so I'll show you how this actually now connects. So the motor is not on at the moment, and I'm just going to push this over, basically just using a couple of fingers. It's not even that difficult to push it over. And once it kind of gets close to that little attachment point at the back, what you can do is this just pushes back a little bit. So just push back, and that slots in like that. And now that is all connected. Okay, and we'll go back up here, and I'm going to show you. So this is the needle setup. It's basically the range you're knitting. So I am currently knitting the needles, 30 needles on the left and 30 needles on the right. So it's set to 3 and 3 on each side on the 4.5. That's for the standard gauge machines. Originally, I was actually setting it to more than what I used to knit because I was kind of worried that it wouldn't knit the edges properly. But so if I was knitting 30, I would set it to like 35. But it actually doesn't matter. It actually knits properly if you just set it to what you're actually knitting. We'll go back up here. You can see I had set it to like 5 rows to knit, but because I had already started moving the motor or the coupler, it had started to move down to 4. It's not quite down to 4. And then here it is set to continuous knitting, and then I'm just going to turn it on, and now it's telling me when the carriage moves, it's going to go to the left because that's the light that's illuminated. And we go back down here. Okay, and what I'm going to do is, let's see, I'm basically going to pull the yarn tight, and that's going to simulate that there is an issue, like that there could be a knot or something like that. And that should trigger the safety. And this is the foot controller that I was talking about earlier. And you can just use that to start and stop. All right, so here we go. Let's see. Go back up. Okay, so that has done what it's supposed to do. The coupler has disconnected, and you can see this little plate has flipped up, and it stopped the actual motor. So the carriage, it didn't quite knit all the way. You can finish knitting by hand. Just push it, okay, finish off the row. And then up here, it's just saying that the carriage stopped. Sorry, the motor, the coupler, stopped when it was moving right. So this is something that I'm still kind of trying to figure out, because what happens now is there could be a discrepancy in the how many rows you've knitted. So there is a row counter here, and you can see as I'm flicking this with my finger, that is the row counter on the actual knitting machine, and that gets triggered by the carriage going past. And the row counter up here, I don't quite know what that gets triggered by, what are the parameters for that particular setting up there to change. But what can happen is, because of the way the carriage disconnected, and that you might have finished knitting off a row, but as you can see, the coupler had sort of gone all the way left and come back right. So I think the coupler now has countered that it has started knitting another row, and so this can cause a discrepancy in the amount of rows you have knitted and then the amount of rows you still have to knit. So you can be under or over, because if you just reset things and just continue knitting without checking your row numbers, you can be a little bit out. So it just pays to check that. And at this stage, I'm not quite 100% sure. I have been over by a row, and that's when I realized that, you know, this is something that can happen. Also in the book, it shows you that yes, if there is some kind of an issue and it gets disconnected, and it will get stopped, the row counter has already counted one more row, etc., etc. So this is something I'm still kind of like trying to figure out, you know, exactly what happens. Let's get back to this. So now with this, to fix it, basically what you have to do is you have to pull this back. You've got to be kind of careful, because there's a quite strong spring, and this thing kind of bites a little bit sometimes. I have hurt my fingers before. And so that's set back up properly. Now you just got to push it back and just again hook it back on, and that's sorted. And now you are good to go again. The other thing I want to mention is up here is where you normally store your tools for your machine. That is a very bad idea when you're using the motor, because what happens is, as the motor goes past, if you try to reach and get it, it's gonna knock your hand. And that I have done that because I thought I was going to be faster than the motor, and it hurts a lot. It does cause the motor to stop, which is a good thing because it senses that there's an issue. It sort of ran into something. But yeah, it does hurt as well. So I don't recommend you store your tools there. I keep my tools sort of on this side now, where, you know, I keep my pattern book, my instruction book, and any tools that I think I might need while I'm knitting. And this is the actual table that the knitting machine came with. So now it's just my little side table. And and one other thing, don't look at the knitting. I know it's got a hole and it's got some loops, because I was experimenting. I was trying to work things out. But what I want to mention is, when you are using the motor, you don't knit. You can't cast on using the motor, so you've got to do that manually. But also, I recommend knitting at least 2 or 3 rows to begin with by hand manually before you engage the motor, because this cast on comb can get in the way. And especially, mine's a bit old, and, you know, some of the teeth are a bit wonky. So it can cause the carriage to jam, which will disconnect the motor. So I just suggest you knit at least 5 rows. I do at least 5 rows by hand. And hopefully that answers some of the questions about the motor and its safety features. And who knows, I might make a few more videos about what I'm doing. Also, now that I noticed that, see how it's flashing left and right? That doesn't mean there's a problem. That actually means that it has stopped knitting the amount of rows you have set it to knit. So this is now 0 and the machine is finished.